The movie opens with Josh, the son of the experienced cave diver and explorer Frank Maguire, welcoming Carl, a wealthy American financing their project, and his wife Victoria to Papua New Guinea. Carl enthusiastically greets Josh and introduces him to Victoria, an avid climber. Together, they journey to the Esa Ala Cave, a remote and challenging underwater cave system located on an island, arriving by helicopter. Frank Maguire has dedicated his life to exploring caves, particularly the Esa Ala Cave, where he leads a team of divers and researchers. His passion for cave exploration is clear, as he believes it to be his life's calling. As the movie progresses, we see Frank and his team deeply immersed in their exploration efforts within the cave. Meanwhile, Josh assists Victoria with her initial dive into the cave. He carefully guides her entry before diving in himself. Carl, equipped with a parachute, follows them into the depths of the cave, where several teams are already at work exploring alongside Frank. During one of their expeditions, Judes, a member of Frank's team, expresses her desire to join Frank in investigating a particular area of the cave. Initially hesitant, Frank eventually agrees to take her along. Their exploration leads to an exciting discovery: a new cave system. This discovery is broadcast to the rest of the team via camera, and everyone shares in the excitement and sense of achievement. However, the exhilaration is short-lived. As Frank and Judes ascend to investigate the new system, Judes encounters a problem with her equipment, a leak in her gear. Frank quickly notices the issue and alerts her, but it's too late to reach the airbell for assistance. In a panic, Judes begins to flood with water. Frank tries to help by suggesting they buddy breathe, sharing his air supply with her. Despite Frank's attempts to calm her and manage the situation, the unfortunate and tragic outcome is that Judes drowns. This incident leaves Frank profoundly saddened and impacts the entire team, casting a shadow over their expedition and setting a somber tone for the rest of the movie. The tension escalates as Josh, deeply troubled by the events in the cave, reviews the video footage of Judes' tragic death. He is convinced that his father Frank forcefully removed Judes' mask, leading to her drowning. Josh is visibly distraught, accusing Frank of being responsible for her death. However, the team tries to reassure Josh, insisting that Frank is not to blame. Despite their efforts, Josh remains skeptical, believing that his father's obsession with cave exploration has put everyone in danger. Meanwhile, a severe storm approaches, barreling in from the coast. The team outside the cave attempts to alert Frank about the impending storm via radio, but Frank, consumed by grief over Jude's death, is unresponsive. Simultaneously, Frank instructs JD and Liz to head back to the surface. Filled with anger and disappointment, Josh insists on accompanying them. Seeing Josh's emotional state, Luca, one of Frank's assistants, offers to accompany him, concerned for his safety. As they begin their ascent, the team is startled by ominous sounds echoing through the cave. Despite their apprehension, they press forward. However, their situation rapidly worsens as the storm hits, causing water to flood the cave entrance. JD and Liz, in a desperate bid for safety, urge Josh to escape with them. Faced with a harrowing decision, Josh chooses to return to the team, refusing to abandon his father and the others trapped inside the cave. The cave rapidly fills with water, plunging the team into a fight for survival. Frank takes charge, emphasizing the importance of following diving guidelines and procedures. Victoria, battling panic, struggles to keep up as she is the last to swim through the narrow passageways. Amidst the chaos, Victoria gets stuck, but the team manages to free her just in time. The group finds a momentary reprieve on a stone ledge where Josh rests and Carl and Victoria tend to each other. The rest of the team also takes this opportunity to regroup and treat their injuries. Soon after, the dire situation of the cave diving team continues to worsen. One team member suggests to Frank that they should explore a section of the cave while waiting for a rescue team. However, Frank quickly dismisses this idea. He points out the grim reality that everyone on the outside likely assumes they are dead, and therefore no rescue team will be coming. Instead, Frank insists that their only chance of survival is to follow the river to reach the ocean. Understanding the urgency of their situation, the team reluctantly agrees and begins their treacherous journey led by Frank. As they navigate the challenging terrain, tragedy strikes again. One of the team members, George, falls gravely ill. Josh is the first to notice George's distress and rushes back to help him. Despite Josh's efforts, George's condition rapidly deteriorates, leaving him in unbearable pain. Realizing his impending fate, George makes a selfless decision. He chooses to stay behind, not wanting to slow down the team or endanger their chances of survival. In an emotional moment, he writes, "George was here on a stone, marking his presence in the cave." Frank calls out for George, but he remains hidden, silently enduring his pain, determined not to burden the group. Meanwhile, tension escalates within the team when Carl, in a moment of recklessness, lights a light and refuses to turn it off despite Frank's insistence. This leads to a heated confrontation between Carl and Frank. Carl accuses Frank of enjoying the power of leading the group and playing God in their desperate situation. Their argument is interrupted by Josh, who brings the somber news that George has died of decompression sickness. Carl, realizing the gravity of their situation, apologizes to Frank. Frank, deeply affected by the loss of George and the mounting challenges, allows himself a moment of vulnerability as he mourns his friend. Tensions escalate further among the trapped divers as they desperately search for an alternative exit from the cave. During this high-stress situation, Carl and Frank get into a heated argument over the best course of action. The group decides to attempt climbing, and Josh volunteers to lead. Initially hesitant, Frank eventually agrees after Victoria persuades him that Josh is the best climber they have. Josh and Victoria then begin the challenging task of climbing to find a way out. Josh proves to be a skilled climber, navigating the difficult terrain with determination, which makes Frank proud. However, tragedy strikes again when Victoria, following behind Josh, gets her hair entangled in the climbing equipment. Panic-stricken and in a desperate attempt to free herself, Victoria ignores Frank's advice not to cut her hair. She uses a knife to try to cut the tangled hair, but in doing so, she loses her balance and falls into the water below, leading to her death. Carl is overwhelmed with grief and guilt, blaming himself for Victoria's fatal accident. In the aftermath, Frank takes the opportunity to teach his son about the mistakes Victoria made and the importance of adhering to the rules of cave diving. He also opens up to Josh, admitting that he feels he has not lived up to the expectations of his wife and son. This moment of vulnerability leads to a deep exchange between father and son, where Josh expresses his fear of dying. They embrace, sharing a moment of emotional connection. After deciding to press on, the group eventually finds a place to rest after navigating numerous challenges. During this brief break, Carl, driven by desperation, steals a rebreather and attempts to escape alone. Josh witnesses Carl's actions and alerts Frank, who, enraged, follows Carl into the water. Frank manages to retrieve the rebreather but returns alone, implying a grim outcome for Carl. Exhausted and pushed to their limits, Josh repeatedly asks Frank about a way out of the cave. Frank, needing rest, responds with laughter, indicating either the strain of their situation or a sense of hopelessness. As the group's desperate search for an exit continues, Josh notices a bat and decides to follow it, theorizing that since bats cannot swim, there must be an accessible entrance or exit where the bat is coming from. Guided by this new hope, Josh and Frank navigate through challenging obstacles, driven by the possibility of finding a way out. After enduring numerous difficulties, they decide to take a rest. It is then that they spot a faint glimmer of light. Filled with renewed hope, they proceed towards the light and discover an opening, which also reveals a river, a potential pathway to escape. As they assess their new discovery, they are suddenly startled by the sound of Carl calling out for Josh and Frank. When they find Carl, he appears desperate and pleads for food. Josh, despite the tension, offers him some from his bag, which Carl consumes hastily. In a moment of remorse, Carl repeatedly apologizes to Josh, claiming that his intention in taking the rebreather was not malicious and that he had planned to return. While Carl is talking, Frank, still harboring anger, calls Josh away, and they decide to leave Carl behind. Carl protests, not wanting to be left alone, but Josh and Frank continue on their way, determined to find a way out. Their departure, however, leads to a violent confrontation. Carl, in a last-ditch effort to survive, attacks Frank from behind, leading to a fierce fight between the two. In the struggle, Carl ends up burning Frank, who collapses to the ground, severely injured. Josh, in a fit of rage, retaliates by attacking Carl, ultimately hanging and submerging him in the water. Returning to his father, Josh finds Frank in a critical state, suffering from severe injuries and immense pain. In his final moments, Frank requests Josh to bring him into the water. With heavy heart and tears, Josh gently carries his father into the water, honoring his last wish. In a deeply emotional scene, Frank, feeling a slight sense of relief in the water, imparts some final words to Josh. He urges his son to press on and follow his instincts, expressing his belief in Josh's capabilities and his pride in him. Frank recognizes Josh's strong survival instincts and encourages him to use them to find a way out. However, Josh is overcome with grief at the prospect of leaving his father. Tearfully, he insists on staying with Frank, but Frank strongly refuses, knowing that staying would mean certain death for Josh. He implores Josh to do him a favor by leaving and saving himself, emphasizing that it's the only way Josh can truly help him. The weight of this decision is heartbreaking for Josh, who is distraught at the thought of leaving his father to die. In a final, tender moment, Josh kisses Frank's forehead in a farewell gesture. With profound sadness, he watches as Frank submerges into the water, surrendering to his fate. Taking the rebreather, Josh, now alone, musters the strength to continue the search for an exit. Despite his overwhelming grief, he perseveres through the cave's treacherous pathways. After much effort and determination, Josh finally finds a way out of the cave. As the movie reaches its conclusion, Josh reflects on his relationship with his father. He acknowledges that he never truly knew his father until their harrowing experience in the cave. This journey of survival not only tested their physical limits, but also brought them closer, allowing Josh to understand and connect with his father in a way he never had before. The story ends with this realization, highlighting the profound impact of their shared hardship and the unbreakable bond formed in the face of adversity.